Just wanted to welcome everybody to our next George Mason University Center for Satellite Earth Science Research webinar. We're excited today to have Dr. Pedro Jimenez Munoz here from NCAR Research Applications Laboratory to talk to us about an important topic related to wildfires, wildfire behavior, and the critical parameters controlling that, including fuel moisture. So I wanted to first introduce Dr. Jimenez Munoz. So Dr. Pedro Jimenez is a senior scientist at the NSF National Centers for Atmospheric Research, or NCAR, specializing in numerical weather prediction. He earned his PhD in physics at the University of Madrid in 2009, focusing on understanding near-surface winds over complex terrain. His research interests also include atmospheric turbulence, cloud aerosol radiation feedbacks, and understanding the spread of wildland fires. He frequently combines numerical weather prediction models with satellite retrievals to constrain or validate the models during an extended temporal period to obtain statistically robust conclusions. He leads the development of the WRF solar model, its cloud initialization component, MAD-WRF, I like the acronym, and its probabilistic framework, the WRF Solar Ensemble Prediction System, or WRF Solar EPS. During the last years, he's been leading the development of the community fire behavior model, and that's in the coupling with the unified forecast system, and the use of satellite retrievals to characterize the fuel moisture content. And I think we'll hear more about that. So with that, Pedro, please take it away. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello, everybody. First of all, thanks for the kind invitation to present at the seminar, Patrick. So I will start with the presentation. The title is Monitoring Life and Death Fuel Moisture Content based on VIIRS and ABI instruments for wildfire applications. So this is work that we've been doing during the last years and mostly funded by JPSS, all what I'm going to show you in the presentation. This is the motivation to focus on the fuel moisture content. It's a relevant variable for a range of applications. The one that is most obvious is for fire danger, and I have here a diagram that shows it's a typical fire danger diagram. You can see in the middle there, the fuel moisture content. And you see on the right that it has the inputs of the life and death. These are the two components or the two variables of the fuel moisture content. And it fits the output of the value of the fuel moisture content into both the probability of ignition and the propagation, the spread, how fast the fires spread, which are key components for the fire danger index. So critical role here, you see it in the middle of the diagram. I also mentioned that for fire spread, when you do simulations or the fire evolution, this is one of the parameters that the fire spread show largest sensitivities. Knowing the fuel moisture content can also be useful for prescribed burns. So you have some kind of guidance of how dry are the fuels, if it is dangerous, the risk, I guess. It could also be relevant for air quality applications. Fuel moisture content controls the combustion efficiency, and that determines the different compounds that are released. And also it can be useful to monitor or to prevent hazard related to power lines, transmission lines, where you can see which parts are more exposed to more risk. One thing that we've been working at NCAR is in fire behavioral simulations. I mentioned the large sensitivity of the spread to this variable. You'll see more in a minute. But before going there, this is a quick illustration of how this model work. This is Wildfire. You see in the middle, you have a fire. We need to know where the fire is located. We do that with a methodology called the level set, which is a standard for tracking the location of interfaces. And then we move it with a parameterization of the rate of spread. That's parameterized based on fuel characteristics, including the fuel moisture content and elevation and variables near the surface, atmospheric variables, like the surface wind. So we know where the fire is located, we advance it, and in that we ignite new cells, we release heat and moisture that feed back the atmosphere, and in that way we have the system coupled because the winds that are affected by the heat and moisture, then they control the fire evolution. This is an animation that I have that shows a simulation with Wildfire. And where you can see at the beginning of the simulation, you see the smoke, and you can see that it's going into higher levels into the atmosphere. That's because the atmosphere is unstable. Now, towards the end of the afternoon, the fire is the smoke is more confined into the lower atmosphere, and this is because the atmosphere is more stable. So you see here with this quick animation how the fire and the atmosphere are coupled and are influencing each other. And on the right, you see the comparison for this fire. The burnt area is in orange, and the simulated perimeter is in blue. And in this case, you see that there is good agreement. This is an easy case because it's homogeneous in terms of wind and fuels. Patrick, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry to jump in. This is really cool, the animation. Do you mind if it's okay if others have questions maybe as we go along?
Yes.
You can see the hand go up, and okay, that's great. And I asked them if there's anything in the chat. They can have a look at the chat and put a question in or something.
Yes.
Great.
I see the hand. Yeah, I see.
Thanks, Pedro. Thank you.
So anyway, this is an illustration of the evolution of the fire. Here in these winds, the winds are steady from the south. This is one of the variables that obviously exert a major influence in the spread of the fire. Another one is the fuel moisture content. You see in this diagram, on the x-axis is the fuel moisture content, and in the y-axis is the rate of spread. It's normalized, but that's the rate of spread. And the different lines show how the rate of spread changes as a function of the fuel moisture content for the 13 fuel models, which are the ground fuels. And you see that in some of them and in certain regions you don't see a large sensitivity, the horizontal lines, but in many parts you see vertical slopes, and there you see large sensitivity to the fuel moisture content. So the simulation of the fire evolution is going to be very sensitive to this parameter, the fuel moisture content. And to illustrate that, I have here a simulation of the cold spring fire. The black shows the burnt area, the observations, and in red are the simulations. And in the middle is where we have a standard in the model. If we don't know anything about the fuel moisture content, then we assume is 8% constant in space and time. And you see that in this case, there is an overestimation of the burnt area. The red perimeter, the simulation, is it overestimates the observation in black. However, you can get different answers. If you go to the left, you see 2%. This is very dry, and you see there is a much larger overestimation. But if you look on the right at 16%, this is much wet. You see that you get an underestimation of the burn area. So clearly, this is a parameter that exerts an important role in the fire spread. This is the fuel moisture content. Is different than the soil moisture content, and I will explain in a minute in the next slide its components, but I like to show this slide that compares the fuel moisture content in blue with the soil moisture in pink, at sites where they have both of them, and you can see that they show correlation in some places, but they are clearly different variables. This is the two components. Indeed, there are the dead and the live fuel moisture content. Here on top of the right, you see a report that I like. It synthesized very well and explains very well these variables and how to measure them. If we start with the dead, that's what I show you on the top left. There's an illustration from this report, and these are the twigs and logs that are in the ground, and they're dead. That's the definition, its own name. And the important thing is that we can measure them automatically, and that's what I showed you there in the middle of the first row. There is a station that measures the fuel moisture content in these fire sticks. To complicate the things a bit more, there are different categories of the dead fuel. On the little table there, you see in the middle the time lag. That's the definition. We have 1 hour, 10 hours, 100 hours, and 1,000 hour fuels. And this is the equilibrium time of the fuels to the moisture in the environment. So the smaller the hour, the smaller the fuel side, the physical extent of the fuel. And the 1 hour and 10 hours, those are very effective in propagating the fire. So we want to get good estimation of those. For the life, it's harder to get observations because we need to go to the field, collect sample observation, I show you here, and then one goes to the lab, and in an oven, you have to cure the samples, and by waiting the before and after, you get an idea how much moisture is in the fuel. And there is this little equation that if you pay attention, you can get fuel moisture content beyond 100. That's the definition. We started a few years ago, several years ago, to use satellite retrievals to estimate the fuel moisture content. And our method, we combine the retrievals of the satellite with numerical weather prediction models, the output from numerical weather prediction models, and we train regression models based on machine learning to have an idea of the fuel moisture content. In this example, we started with a MODIS instrument. It was a NASA grant, and we combined the output from the National Water Model and MODIS, and we get the kind of retrieval that you see on the right. The grid spacing of the retrieval was 1 kilometer, and we were covering conus. And later, we extended this work addressing some limitations, like the life expectancy of the MODIS instrument, that they are highly successful, but they are beyond their life expectancy. The grid spacing is high, but it could be higher at sub-kilometer scales. And we're limited here to overpasses of the MODIS instruments during the daytime overpasses, so 2 per day, so you don't capture very well the diurnal cycle. And we were restricted to conus. So this is how we started. And then we started with to use the VIIRS instruments. And this is an illustration of the methodology I was describing before. But now here we see the retrievals using VIIRS. So as I mentioned, we use regression models based on machine learning, and the predictors from meteorological models is hard in this case, near surface variables and soil variables characterizing the moisture, and surface reflectances and land surface temperature and cloud mass from VIIRS. In this case, I'm going to show you we use 3 years of data for the calibration of the model. And conceptually, calibrating these machine learning models is similar to fitting parameters in a multilinear regression. That's what I show you here. We want to determine these parameters, the A's, and we have the predictors, which are the satellites and reflectance from and retrieval from the satellite, which are the X here. And then we have to calibrate where we have these, where we have observations of the fuel moisture content. So then we determine these parameters at these points, and then we use these parameters everywhere across the satellite swath in this case. As observations, we've been using for the dead fuel moisture content, we have observations from the NOAA MADIS archive, 10-hour fuel moisture content from automatic stations. They are available every hour and at many locations over conus. So we have very good observation for the case of the dead. For the life, it's harder. The observations are more scarce in time and space, so we have less observations, and we use observation from the National Field Moisture Database, which is now FEMS. So I want to show you some results of how this plays out when the performance of the retrievals. I'm going to use results from the paper that you see here on the bottom, if you have interest to learn further details. This is how we calibrate. We split the data set into training, validation, and testing. So we go to training data set, we fit the parameters, then we check in the validation data set, we tweak the parameters, go back into training, and so on until we are happy with the parameters. And when that's done, we check with the testing data set, and ideally you should see similar results as in the validation. That shows that you are not overfitting. And this is what you see here. I like you to pay attention to the histograms. At the bottom, you see that there is agreement between the truth, the observations, and what we train with the model. You can see that the histogram is skewed with a long tail on the right. You see that there are very few observations in this part of the tail, larger values of the fuel moisture content. You see that's different later when we include observations during the whole every hour, the whole diurnal cycle. This is just for the daily overpasses, daytime overpasses of VIIRS, which is around 19 UTC. You can also take a look to see which variables are more important and to see that what the model has learned makes sense. And here you see that the most important variables are the land surface temperature from VIIRS and the humidity near the surface. So the model is learning what is in agreement with our physical understanding, because the dead fuel reaches an equilibrium with the atmospheric moisture. One thing that I want to highlight in this slide is that we did two kinds of splitting into this validation, training, and testing. In the first one that you see in the top is what we call random, and here we collocate all the observations and the predictors from all the sites, and we randomly put pairs in the training, validation, and testing. This means that the validation and testing, they are at sites that were present during the training. And that's what we avoided in the second part. In the second part that we call site, each data set of the three, it has different sites. So we select sites that go into training, sites into validation, and sites into testing. I think this is more a more fair evaluation what we will expect when we generalize the performance of the retrievals, that will go beyond the site where we train the model and we go to the entire swath. This is how it works. This is the root mean square error on the left, and the coefficient of determination on the right, and you see the distribution of the stations. Two things to highlight here. You see that the errors are about 2.5% for the case of the random splitting, the root mean square error. And if you look at the site evaluation, you see that these errors are bigger. It goes 1% higher. And typically, the standard method is this random splitting. And it seems that when we go this way, we are overconfident in the model, because when we extrapolate the information, I will expect the errors to be more aligned with the site splitting, the second row here, where the errors are about 1% higher. The coefficient of determination is general positive, which is good. And to have a sense of how good are these estimations, what we did was to use a skill score. This is a very simple definition, right? And is in every statistical book of evaluation, and we just need to have a reference estimation. And in this case, we use climatology. So climatology is our reference. We calculate the root mean square error, and also we calculate the root mean square error using the regression model. So in this way, we are in between 0 and 1. We improve with respect to climatology in this case, and if we are negative, we don't. And 1 is perfect, and 0 means we are at the same level as climatology. So when we compare the errors I showed you in the previous slide, now we compare it with climatology. Here I would like to see skills above 0 to show that the retrievals are skillful with respect to climatology. And here climatology is we calculate it with the observations. So we do averages to have a diurnal and annual cycles. So this is an hourly climatology. And what you see in the first row, this is the random splitting. You see improvements about 47% in terms of the root mean square error and 76% in terms of the coefficient of determination. But if you look at the bottom row, you see that when we do the site splitting, these errors are smaller. They are about still positive, and it shows that we are on average 25% better than root mean square error, and about 60% in terms of correlation, coefficient of determination. And I think this is a better estimation of the errors across the swath. Patrick.
Yeah, that's great. That's just a quick clarification. What are these? Are these all representative of ground observation sites?
Yes, these are automatic stations that they measure the 10 hours dead fuel moisture content, and they are available every hour. And here the period is about 3 years.
Oh, okay. What's the network again? I must have missed it. Then
this is from MADIS, NOAA MADIS.
Oh, okay. Okay, MADIS network, right?
MADIS, yes, exactly.
Yeah, and they have
available in real time.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. This is one way to visualize it in terms of space. This is the other way around. Here you have the errors or the skill score for each month of the year. And here the boxes represent the distribution of the sites that you saw in the previous slides. The first row is for random splitting. Again, you see that it's about 50%, so 50% improvement with respect to climatology. And when you go to, or even higher, and when you go to the site evaluation, again, this is more representative of the errors in the retrievals, you go lower, but you still see overall positive skill scores, meaning that the retrievals are skillful with respect to climatology. These are the dead fuel moisture content retrieval. We are running a demonstration of the retrievals. We started a couple years ago. It's a real-time demonstration. Here is a link where you can get the visualization. And you see the 3 regions that we are producing the retrievals, the contiguous US, Alaska, and Hawaii. And here we are leveraging internal resources to those provided by JPSS to extend this to Hawaii, where we started in Alaska and Congress. This is how it's performing the performance of the demonstration. We are monitoring. So now this is no research like before. Now this is running in quasi real time, and we are checking with the MADIS that comes in real time the data. And here you have about 2 years of data. You see in blue the mean absolute error, which is about 2%, the error in the dead fuel moisture content. And the root mean square error is obviously a bit larger. This is an agreement with what we saw before. You see also there is an annual evolution in the error. We tend to be better during the dry season with lower errors. And the bias in orange, you see, is close to 0, so nearly unbiased. In the winter or the cold season, you see the errors are larger, and you see some more variability, and this is related to precipitation events that we tend to capture, but the moisture is not as high as the observations, so that's why we seem to saw worse scores. But we we predict that it's moist, but not as much as the observation. For some situations, this may be sufficient or good to know that the moisture is going to be high. This is the scale again, comparing climatology, and in orange is with respect to the root mean square error, in blue is with respect to the mean absolute error, and you see that this blue one with respect to the mean absolute error is around 0.5, the skill of the retrieval running quasi-operationally. This is what I wanted to say about the dead fuel moisture content. Things seem to be working. We see the skill. For the live fuel moisture content, I'm going to show you that is a much harder variable and things are not going as well. This is the same diagram I showed you before, but now for the live fuel moisture content retrievals. And thing to notice is that in the x-axis, we have the month of the year. We have to go to monthly time scales with the live because of the scarcity of observations. There are much less in time and in space. And in blue are the, well, this is the error. Blue is the error of our retrievals. And you see that at the beginning, in the spring, we are not better than climatology, but we are at the same level as climatology in the second part of the year. So in this region, our retrievals, the benefit of the retrieval will be in the larger spatiotemporal coverage, but not in the magnitude of the error with respect to climatology. What is happening here is that what we are doing in our regression is that we are averaging all the observations of the live fuel moisture content available at the given sites. So we are mixing the fuel moisture content from different plant species. And these species may have different variability or annual variability. That's what I illustrate here with this slide. If you look at the brown line, for example, that is the Douglas fir, and you see that it peaks in the summer. And you take a look to the purple line, that is the manzanita green leaf. You see that it's picking up in the first part of the year. So clearly we are mixing signals here. If you look at the red and orange lines, those are the error, what we get with the climatology and the retrieval we are getting. So this is a limitation that we have right now, which is predicting a generic plant, and has a benefit in certain parts of the year. We are at the level of climatology, so we get better spatiotemporal characterization of the live fuel moisture content. This is something that we are working on improving, and I will show you where we are heading at the end of the presentation. This is another example of the kind of errors that we will expect. On the left, we tend to see that we tend to underestimate the cold season peak, and sometimes the retrievals are in blue, and this is for two sites, and climatology is in green, and you see that sometimes climatology gets the peak, all this time they don't get it. It doesn't get it. So that one limitation, and that's associated probably because in the data set we use, there are less observations during the winter season, the cold season. And on the right, you have the limitation of the plant type. So you may be in agreement with one particular plant, like the one you see on the top, but then you are not in agreement with the observations of another plant type at the same site because they had different evolution. Again, we are working to overcome these limitations more. I have a couple of slides at the end. That was for VIIRS, and with VIIRS you get retrievals at the daytime overpasses because we are using the surface reflectances. And we have been working also with GOES ABI. With this one, with this instrument, you get more frequent retrievals every hour we're using, and at the price of lower or coarser resolution. We are doing retrievals about 2 kilometers. This is again the same that I showed you before for VIIRS. You see the training, validation, and testing data set. And before I was highlighting how the skewness, the positive skew of the histogram. Now you see the same here, but now you see much more observations on the high values of the fuel moisture content. And that's because now we are sampling the whole diurnal cycle. We have observations every hour. And the predictors that we use here for the ABI instrument are the 16 channels, the brightness, temperatures, and reflectances, as well as the land surface temperature product. And we pair this with the hard numerical weather prediction model output that it brings substantial value. Hard is a part of the skill that you see here is because we have characterization of the near surface observations in conjunction with the satellite. This is an illustration of what you gain when you go to ABI. This is a day. You see retrieval has 6, 12, 18, and 0 UTC. And if you look at the eastern part of the country, you see the clear diurnal cycle is the fuel moisture content is more wet at 6 and 12 UTC than is at 18 and 0 UTC. In the west, there is less impact. There is less of a diurnal cycle in this case. And you take a look what you will get with VIIRS. This is on top right is one granule from VIIRS, the one at 19 UTC. And you see that when we put it all together, so it's around that time before and after 19 UTC, you get the plot on the bottom right. So that's valid around 19 UTC, and you see that that's in agreement with the retrievals around 18 UTC from GOES. So this is clearly a limitation of not sampling the whole diurnal cycle with this. This is I'm moving on to the value of combining the two satellites, and this is the motivation for doing this is that we can get the you can get the benefit from the two instruments. ABI gives you much frequent temporal retrievals, the price of reducing the resolution, and VIIRS it has the opposite characteristics. Less temporal resolution, but finer grid spacing. It can go at 375 meters. We are retrieving the fuel moisture content at this grid spacing, 375. So we did this experiment to see how good we are with respect to hard alone, so to quantify the value of the retrievals. So for that, we calibrated a regression model with just hard. And then we have other two experiments, regression models, where we added, in one of them, we have hard plus VIIRS. This is similar to what I showed you before at the beginning of the presentation. And the other, we have hard plus ABI, similar to what I just showed you before in the previous slide. And then finally, we have a different experiment where we combine the three. We combine hard, VIIRS, and ABI to see what is the complementarity or the added value of the variables that we have from VIIRS and ABI. We created two data sets. The first one is valid at the VIIRS overpasses. We call it daily because there's one value typically per day. And this is similar to what the data set I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, the first one with VIIRS. And then the hourly data set, similar to what I showed you with ABI, we have observations every hour. And here the difference from before is that we can apply VIIRS here too, but we have a new variable, the VIIRS lag hour, where we keep track of how old is the VIIRS overpass. And again, the two questions that we have with these experiments. The first one, if I phrase it in terms of a question, is what is the added value of the retrievals with respect to purely numerical weather prediction output, just HAR? So HAR now is our reference. Before we had climatology. Now the skill of the HAR regression model is going to be our reference. And the second one is, do we gain anything by combining VIIRS and ABI predictors in order to obtain retrievals every hour and 375 meters? So those are the two questions that we had. This is the daily data set. So you see on the histogram how the tail is positive, the skew is positive. You see the tail is thin, right? And you see the errors. This is purely HAR. So these are the errors of a regression model that estimates the fuel moisture content based only on HAR near surface VIIRS. And you can see that it's a good model. And the mean absolute error is around, most of the size you see a small value in purple. And you go to the bottom left, the root mean square error, you see more red and yellow errors. That means that the errors are larger for the case of the root mean square error. And you see the correlation that is in the bluish part around 0.4, 0.5. If we compare it with the next slide, which is going to be the same, but now with the hourly data set, here you see that we have much more values in the tail on the right, because we are expanding the sampling of the diurnal cycle. There are parts of the diurnal cycle not covered by VIIRS where the fuel moisture content is much wetter. And what you see, you remember the errors from before, you see that the mean absolute error goes up. You see more reds and yellow. You can definitely see that in the root mean square error, more yellows and more reddish now. And if you look on the correlation, you see that it's going up. In this case, it's getting better, and that's because we are adding the diurnal cycle, and that increases the correlation because the model is able to get the diurnal variability. All right, so that's our reference. In this little table, I show you the comparison or the quantification of the performance of the experiments. This is again for the dead fuel moisture content, the 10 hours dead fuel moisture content. And if you look on in the table, the first part, the one on the top, that's related to daily data. So collocated with VIIRS like hour is 0. You see in the first row of the upper part, the metrics, root mean square error, mean absolute error, and coefficient of determination for the different experiments, which are the columns. And what I want to highlight is that when you get the lowest errors is when you combine the two instruments, the experiment HAR plus ABI plus VIIRS. And you can better appreciate that in the second part of this second row of the upper part of the table. And here is the skill score, and we are using now the estimations from a regression model just using HAR as a reference. You can see how ABI and VIIRS have similar improvements. ABI is a bit better in this case, but you can see on the right how the improvements are much larger when you combine the two instruments. And if you go to the bottom part of the table, you see that this is magnified for the case of the hourly predictions. In particular, if you go to the right, you see that the improvements with the HAR, ABI, and VIIRS model, they are about 27% reduction of the error or improvement for the mean absolute error and root mean square error, and 46% or 47% reduction of the error for the case of the coefficient of determination. So you clearly have added value and it makes sense to combine the predictors that we are using here from VIIRS and ABI. This is an illustration of how the errors or the improvements are distributed across the US, and I'm not going to the details, but you see that in general you see homogeneous behavior for the case of the errors, the mean absolute error, the root mean square error, and the coefficient of determination for the ABI instrument. You get a bit better with, or you get better with just VIIRS. You see more reds in this in the middle column, and you definitely get more reds or better skill when you combine the two instruments on the column on the right. And this is more or less general across the country. This is what I showed you before, the skill score evolution over the year, the annual cycle, the annual the skill score across the different months. And you see that for the case of ABI, the improvements are about 10%, more or less, a bit higher for the case of VIIRS in the middle of the columns, homogeneous, more or less, improvements through the year. And you see that on the right that the better skill is obtained with this combination of ABI and VIIRS, and this is more or less homogeneous or systematic. I'll say the improvements are systematic through the year. Now we are in hourly scales, so we can take a look at how we do in terms of the diurnal cycle. And now what I show you is the skill, again, using hard only regression model as a reference. And you can see similar as before, systematic improvements through the diurnal cycle. And when we combine the two instruments, ABI and VIIRS, the column on the right is where we get the better skills, so the best improvement with respect to hard. This is what the work that we have already, the results I have. Before wrapping up, I have a couple of slides to show where we are heading. And I already mentioned it, that the live film stock content retrieval, there is room for improvement. And how we are going after this is we are going to split the retrievals from different types of plants. Particularly, we are going to divide into grass, shrubs, and trees. And this is an example of the kind of data available. You see on top left for a particular type of grass, where it's located, and the variability on the right for, I think, the last 20 years or so. And you can see the same for the shrubs, for this particular one, and for the trees, the same. Initially, we're thinking in retrieving for these three categories. In reality, it's more complicated, and you have variability within each of these categories. So different shrubs have different variability, and also are available over different regions. So we need to see how we are able to improve our current methodology of the mean plants that we have. And I showed you before that we were going to retrieve the grass, the shrubs, and the trees. And for that, you need to know where are they, which location have grass, which location have trees, which location have shrubs. And for that, we are in the process of training a model to retrieve exactly this, the grass, shrubs, and trees. And we are working right now in creating the training data set. We are using as predictors retrieval from Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2. This is ongoing work at this time, but that's where we are heading on how to improve what we already have. This brings me to the conclusions. We are retrieving the live and 10 hours death fuel moisture content. The methodology that we use is based on regression models using machine learning. I don't know if I mentioned, but the method we use is XGBoost, and with predictors from satellite retrievals and output from numerical weather prediction models characterizing the near surface atmosphere, HAR, essentially. And summary, we definitely see a skill with respect to climatology for the 10-hour fuel moisture content. And there is value in combining VIIRS and the ABI instrument for the case of the dead fuel moisture content to get fine spatial scale and hourly temporal resolution. And definitely there is room for improvement of what we have currently for the live fuel moisture content retrievals. That's all I have, Patrick. I can take questions now.